This is Paula Coldagelli. Paula does ministry at Brookfield Christian Reformed Church, and I guess elsewhere. Life is ministry, but I guess her job is at Brookfield Christian Reformed Church. I'll just put it that way. And we're very thankful to have Paula as our Council of Delegates representative. Is that the phrase, Paula? Does every Classis have a representative? That can't be. Oh, really?
Yep. There's one delegate for each of the 49 classes, which 49. We know are regional assemblies. And then there's up to 10 at-large members. And that brings more balance to the Canadian side of our denomination, as there aren't as many churches, aren't as many classes.
How many, do you know off the top of your head, how many classes in Canada?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
13 kind of sticks to my head, but
I think those are colonies.
Maybe. Sorry. I know it. And I really need to say that part of our education, right, is to remember we are a binational church, right? And we need to remember that we as U.S. don't always know a lot about the cultural differences with Canada.
And there are some, as close as the cultures can be. Anyways, just as recap, we did this once before, but just briefly, what is the Council of Delegates? What are these 49 plus 10 people doing?
So we're actually the broadest assembly of the denomination outside of Synod. So we represent you, basically, as a group of delegates that operate in the interim of Synod. So there are things that might specifically be given to the Council of Delegates from our Synod.
So you said you work in the interim of Synod, so there might be things that come up between synodical meetings that you might have to address. But does the Council of Delegates also put together the agenda for Synod?
No, that comes out of the Director of Synodical Services.
Okay. I wondered because the Council of Delegates, the way I often think about it, and you can just mute for a little bit if someone's watching that doesn't care about all the polity stuff, but it might be helpful to understand the structure of the CRC. I think of the Council of Delegates a lot like the CIC at the classical level. The Classical Interim Committee is a smaller group from our local classis that meets in the interim of classis meetings to kind of take care of things that come up and need to be dealt with more immediately. But the CIC puts together the agenda typically for classes, which is Council of Delegates.
So we have a full report, right, that will go to Synod of actions that either they've asked us to do or things. It's a lot of like budget approvals and hiring approvals, and that still may need to be ratified at Synod. But it's a lot of that legwork that has to get done in the interim.
Yeah. So there's actually, I just got in my email highlights from the Council of Delegates meeting, which was a couple weeks ago. So those are publicly available. And if I think about it, I'll put it in a link in the description of the video. But share a little bit, Paula, what you guys talk about, and what were your thoughts?
So I think I was trying to think about some of the things that would be most interesting to our classes. And I think one of the things, and I did ask you and a few of the other pastors in our classes to kind of answer some questions about church growth. And we kind of opened our meetings on Wednesday night with a roundtable. And we were all kind of assigned a group to kind of bring those thoughts about church growth, what it's been like coming out of COVID, kind of things that we've identified as maybe hindrances to church growth, but also what is like the one thing that we felt we needed to focus on more. And interestingly, the kind of resounding from the whole group, I think discipleship was kind of a huge thing. And also just bringing people back kind of into the fold, like reminding them what it's like to be the church and be the church, right? As we kind of were online for a long time. And so that was just nothing.
Can I ask, was there any information shared? Have other churches felt like coming back from being virtual, there's been some barriers to reentry? Was that
Yeah,
common?
I think, if we've ever had these discussions, and really this kind of conglomerate report is going to go to the Office of General Secretary kind of for information. And there were some statistics that were given and all of that. But I think the one thing I find from discussions like this, that like we're not alone, right? As churches, kind of no matter where we are binationally, the impact, somebody said, COVID was like an accelerator, right? It just was an accelerator.
Yeah.
So if you have people that were maybe disgruntled, it was one more thing that just kind of accelerated. But it also has just, we've read that with like school reports, right? Like the damage that keeping kids out of school had maybe. And we've just, we're just kind of all lamenting that it's had its impact. And it's also fueled a lot of kind of cultural choices, right? Like being able to like, well, I can go online now, or how do we regain community?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Continuing on. Sorry for the interruption. That
No.
resonates here at Oostburg, and just wondered.
Yeah.
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 Nice to know
It was
we're
just
not the
it
only
was a
ones.
vibrant and I think really good discussion. And I think when we have things like that, for me personally, those are really valuable times of conversation, right?
Yeah. Cool.
So I think just kind of, I usually come away very hopeful from these meetings, right? Because you hear a lot of the good that's being done from the denominational level. I think one of the things I always think about as a lay leader, right, in the church, how is this impacting us here in Brookfield? Like some of the decisions or some of the changes, right? How does this impact us? And I think one of the big things that has happened, some of it has to do with a reduction in ministry shares, and just some really deep digging into structure, is they're reorganizing congregational ministries. And a lot of us use a lot of that function, right? Safe church, faith formation curriculum, chaplaincy, all of those different worship, all those 9 positions that were kind of siloed in under this banner of congregational ministries is now kind of reemerging as an agency. And I don't completely understand it all, but what they've done is eliminated sort of the directorship roles. Part of that was a budgetary concern, like not replacing, but also they're trying to kind of dismantle the silos so that when the local church then calls the denomination office and says, I have a question about faith formation or dwell curriculum, right? You've got people that know enough about everything, right? They're generalists, that they can answer your question and get you to the right person rather than, I got to remember that I have to call this person.
Specific office. Yeah.
So we'll see. We did appoint 2 co-directors, one in Canada and one in the US, that will be overseeing this kind of new agency. So that was something I thought that would impact maybe our local.
I did see on the highlights that you were talking about the new model for ministry shares. Classis Wisconsin, we haven't done very well with it. I think I approve of the change. I like it, but we haven't done a great job of getting our stuff in on time and kind of changing with the change. What was that discussion like? Have they found that that's been a good change?
So we had a robust discussion about ministry shares too, led by Jeff Holt. And I think, we've kind of just gone through the first budget cycle using this new system. I kind of want to say that we have work to be done, right? Like with regard to having that family discussion that we're supposed to have, bringing our number to classes.
Yeah, at the classical level, right.
And I think, as Classis Wisconsin, we're trying to get there. But we also kind of have heard that, it's still a real big challenge, right? It's a big challenge. I think another thing for our classes to know is that Dee Rucker is retiring. And I know Dee has been a very huge resource to many people for many, many years. She will be leaving in, I think officially in April, but maybe January, maybe doing a little work, kind of transitioning and training. So they are looking for a new director of synodical services and we were supposed to ratify that in November. So I think that they're kind of drilling down, finalizing some of that. But we sort of had time to celebrate her, as it would be her last COD meeting. I think one of the bigger kind of, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but we did spend a lot of time talking about how delegates request an exception regarding our statement of agreement. If they don't agree with a synodical decision, that was, so we approved a process. It's not like a church order thing or whatever, but if you are not in agreement with a position, right, how to appeal that. And I think, we have the form for office bearers but we're not all office bearers. Like, I'm not an office bearer. So
on the Council of Delegates, you mean? So
right?
if you're an office bearer, pastor, elder, or deacon, you'll have to sign the form of subscription in your church and also at the classical level. But if you're a lay person or non-ordained position and you're on the Council of Delegates, you wouldn't have had to sign that, right?
Right. So, and you're really not allowed, as far as I understand, an exception if you sign the subscription for office bearer, right? So, so there was a process that we approved, and again, I think there's going to be they have to, if I don't agree, right, I have to submit a kind of a rationale to the executive committee for that. My name isn't like put out, publicly, and they have to then examine that and make a determination whether that is a valid exception.
Sure.
So that was an interesting conversation. But again, I think it's also kind of bodes to, to how this is still a pretty new body, right? 6 years old, right? What are we considering? We're not sending all pastors and elders and deacons as delegates. And, in the end, I think, there's a process that was described that would be followed. And if an exception's not granted, then I think the decision has to come down to whether or not that person is still able to serve, right, in good conscience.
Yeah. What was the? Go ahead.
There's articles about it in the banner.
Sure, yeah. So. What was the general mood of Council of Delegates meetings and the attitude toward the denomination?
It's generally a pretty collegial group, right? I think, to be, you and I were chatting a little bit beforehand, and there's still tension in the room over the HSR. Clearly there's, classes and there's people, right, that are struggling with those decisions. I think that still sort of overshadows some of what we do, right? And I think we're going to have to live in that messy for a while, maybe forever. It's just kind of how things are going, right? Sure. But I think, the group itself, we can have varying views on some things, right? But I think it's a beautiful representation of the greater body of Christ and the things that we get to hear. Like, there are like 17 Venezuelan churches that want to join the CRC. Like, church growth outside of the U.S. is amazing. Like, so you want to come away with like, there's still this kind of muck, right? In some ways, but there's also this great joy of good things that are going on.
Right. I feel the same way usually at Classis meetings.
Yeah.
Our churches are really unified, and there's real great leadership across the Classis. But we do things different, and sometimes people come and they have to share a report and say, we're really down membership and we're kind of worried, and you kind of lament for a moment, and then the next person comes up and gives a report and says, we're so full, we're going to plant a church, and that church already is full, and you're like, oh wow. And then And the next person comes up and says, we've got this issue with this ministry and it's really causing a problem. And then the next person comes up and said, we started this ministry and it's so great. And so it's this challenge to like do life together it just necessarily brings joys and sorrows when you combine about it.
And I think the beautiful thing of, our church up structure, is we are going to be unique entities. So, and we have we have order and structure, that bind us together. But that kind of representation, it's going to be unique in certain cultural contexts too, right?
Yes. And just the strengths and weaknesses of a given gathered body.
Right.
Things that we're good at, Brookfield might not be good at, and things that Brookfield are good at, we might not be good at, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And I think when we can have really good discussion around a table, like we can learn from each other too, right? I think that's always a good thing. So I sometimes I scratch my head, right? But a lot of times I come away really hopeful, and I try and want to be helpful, right? Really, most importantly, want to be helpful to our classes, and assure them that I go into these meetings as read up as I can, as diligent in my deliberation, keeping in mind, I know it is a deliberative body, right? But I also keep in mind my classes and say, kind of they're sending me, so I want to represent them well.
Right. Well, we do appreciate you, and you do a great job, Paula.
Thank you.